Hi, welcome to the Revere Veterans Community Show. Today we have two special guests and two special heroes, and I'd like to introduce you to them. We have Woody Woodhouse, who was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. Welcome, Woody. And Woody was a judge advocate general, but more important than that, he was with the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yes.
Am I correct on that, Woody?
You're correct. You pronounced correctly.
Thank you, Woody. And the second gentleman is Mr. Jim Cotter. He was a sergeant in the United States Air Force. And you're the one that introduced me to Woody, so I'm going to start off and just ask you one question, then I want to talk to Woody. How did you meet such a nice gentleman, Jim?
Well, my mother's ancestors came into Charlestown in 1637, and he became a sergeant in the Charlestown Militia in 1638. So they have something called right of descent.
1638?
Right.
Okay, I thought I heard.
So they have, by right of descent, if you have any ancestors who were in militias between 1638 1738, you come into an organization called Ancient and Honorable Artillery in Boston, which is a very interesting. The whole top floor of Faneuil Hall has a museum going back to 1638, which was the first muster. So I came in for a meeting, and here I am sitting in this, and I hadn't met Woody at that time. And sitting in front of me is Navy Captain Tom Hudner, who will be 89 next month, Medal of Honor from Korea. Sitting next to me was a Major General, and Woody's someplace in the audience. And I'm like, how the heck am I a sergeant in the middle of this group? But by coming in by right of descent is a lot different than many of the members who do not have the descent. So we have sergeants 1643, 1680, 1750s, French and Indian Wars, First Lieutenant Battle Day, Lexington, Concord out of Woburn. So I get introduced to this gentleman and hit it off. And I've been dragging him around to different military things that I've been doing over the last 2 years.
Right, we met at the Vietnam War, but before we continue with it, because you're next, I want to thank each one of you, from a World War II veteran, which he is, to a Vietnam veteran. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Woody, you especially, thank you for your service, sir.
You're
now, you were
welcome.
with the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yes.
Airmen.
Mm-hmm.
You got a lot of good stories to tell us, and I would like you to start off how you first got into the Air Force.
Well, like all stories, truth is stranger than fiction. Going back to 1944, I graduated from Boston English High School. And in those days, right after you graduated, every one of us went over to our local recruiting office to sign up to make America safe for democracy. Unlike today, we weren't concerned about what college we were going to or what job we were going to get. Our job was to defend America. And all of us, to the man, went to our respective recruiting places. The guys that wanted to go to the Navy went over to the Fargo building by South Station. Everybody knows that. The Army guys, we went over to the Cadillac building, Peter Fuller's place on Commonwealth Avenue. And we enlisted, all of us. So I started out as a private, and we went to fulfill our duties. I just want to say one thing about my first trip, and I told this to Governor Romney. I'm not a name dropper, but when you get a certain age, you don't mind saying what it is. Can you imagine a young man of 17 of color going to one of his first places of duty in Utah, Mormon, Utah? So we got on a train, and we were all together. I was the only person of color for some reason. And we all left South Station, all full of vim and vigor and enthusiasm. And when we got to St. Louis, we were switching rail carriers. I never will forget, we switched to the MKT line, Missouri, Kansas, and Topeka or something. So the conductor came through. We were all in khakis. And the conductor says, shouting in a loud voice, "Get off the train." And, you know, we were all in uniform, and I didn't know who he was talking to. So he came up and tapped me on the shoulder rather vigorously and said, I said, "You, get off the train."
Pointing at you?
Yeah, yeah, he didn't point at me. He tapped me vigorously, as I said, on the shoulder. "Get off the train." And I told him, I said, "Look, I'm in the military. You see my uniform. I have orders." He says, "You don't ride this train. Get off." So I didn't want to argue. My classmates were embarrassed. They didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. So I left them. A lot of them I've never seen since. So I got off, and a black Pullman porter standing outside, and he says, "Son, where are you from?" I said, "Boston." He says, "Have you ever been here before?" I said, "I've been to New York and Washington, that's it." He said, "Well," he said, "here, we don't ride this train." He says, "There'll be one coming along for you in about 5 or 6 hours, and you can get on that one." I said, "I can't get on that train. I'll be AWOL." He said, "That's the way it is." So to make a long story short, I waited on that and caught that next train out. And of course, the coach was right next to the coal car, and in khakis in the summer. The smoke, soot just got all over my uniform. It was just filthy. So my first reporting for duty, I was 20 hours AWOL coming in with a filthy uniform. And I got rather reprimanded very strongly. So that was my first day in the U.S. Army. A long story, but true.
Before I get to you, Jim, I'd just like to read something, Woody, and I want you to tell me if this is true, because this come off the internet. Who are the Tuskegee Airmen of World War II? The Tuskegee Airmen were dedicated, determined young men who enlisted to become America's first black military airmen. At a time when there were many people who thought that black men lacked intelligence, skill, courage, and patriotism, and your college education is a lot bigger than mine, believe you. They came from every section of the country, with large numbers coming from New York City, Washington, D.C., I guess they mean, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Detroit, and you came from Boston. Each one of these possessed a strong personal desire to serve the United States of America, and you are one of them.
That's a very true statement, and for once the internet is fairly accurate.
Fairly accurate? Now, I want to go back to your friend Jim here. Jim, you in the service, exactly what did you do in the service, if I may ask you? Your job.
Well, I went to Northeastern in Boston College, and we parted company in the spring of '63. So I saw handwriting on the wall. So I took the Air Force enlisted exam for no obligation. So in October of '63, I got drafted at 10 in the morning. Okay, enlisted in the Air Force 2 hours later. And then I waited till February '64. Went through basic training.
How old were you when you first got into the service?
I was 23. I was a lot older than regular. So they said, well, what are we going to do? And I applied for a nuclear reactor program, where they only took 5 enlisted guys a year. So we're going to make you a missile airframe repair on an Atlas missile, a heavy equipment operator, or you're going to be a weapons mechanic. Okay, so you work on weapons. So first thing, they sent me to nuclear weapons school up into Lowry, Denver, Colorado. So for 4 months, we loaded every nuclear weapon in the U.S. inventory. I mean, they had the B-52s carried 2 big 15, 25 megaton weapons that were, you know, almost as big as this room on it. And finished weapons school. Got posted to Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, September 1st, 1964, 27th Fighter Wing. The whole wing had left 4 days before. You're talking 4 squadrons of F-100s, and the whole base moved into Benoit, Tonsanute for 90 days. So my first Air Force job was a pitchfork, a pickup truck taking the tumbleweeds away from the hangar doors for 60 days.
Jim, I got to ask you a question. Maybe Woody could correct me, because this is the Second World War and the Vietnam War. There were 13 million troops during the Second World War. I mean, Navy, Army, Air Corps, Marines, roughly. Out of all of them, only 900 were Tuskegee Airmen. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a fair statement.
Right? And from what I understand, you met a gentleman there by the name of Benjamin Davis, I believe. Benjamin O. Davis, Jr.?
Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., and we called him B.O. the CO. He was West Point class of 1936.
Right.
And as finance officer for the group, I might explain the way military were paid in World War II was strictly by cash. And every person, particularly the officers mainly, they would come to the pay window and get their pay in cash. No checks, because no one had a bank account. So our job, as I was finance officer at Lockbourne, we would pay after getting a duffel bag full of U.S. currency, which was probably $1 or $2 million, because there we would have to take care of men coming in and transients. So we wouldn't pay by check, we would pay by cash. So in answer to B.L. Davis's query, my job as a second lieutenant was to pay him in cash personally, and his pay was a big astronomical sum, like around $700 a month. I have never counted out $732.23 more than 10 times to have it exactly correct. And that was the pay for B.O. the CO.
I got to tell you, you mentioned $732+ a month.
Yeah.
When I was in the Army as a
Yeah.
private, when I first went
Yeah.
in, $21 a month was all I got. 21. And what did you get when you first went into the Air Force?
Well, we were paid as privates. I'm not going to use the other word for buck privates, but it was buck dash private. That was $50 a month.
So it went up then.
Yes, and then you would be given the option of having a life insurance for your mother or your girlfriend, but we were all teenagers, so our life insurance policy was $10,000. So
That's
we
what
would
mine
put,
was too.
yeah, we would put our lives on the line for $10,000 a month.
Right.
Eh.
Now I got to go to you, Jim. When you went into Vietnam, what was your base pay?
I could have been more than $250 a month.
A month?
Yeah.
As a private?
As a sergeant, yeah.
I wish I could have enlisted Dennis when I enlisted.
Oh, I know.
But that's great. But what did you really do as a Vietnam? Because you worked, I understand, loading, working with atomic weapons,
Nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons.
Yeah, we when the wing came back from Vietnam in early November '64, 2 months later we took off for Misawa, Japan, and Kunsan, Korea, and we were gone over there for 90 days. Came back, went to the Philippines, and flipped up to Tainan, Taiwan for another 90 days. While we were there, they asked, does anyone want to come back here for 2 years, permanent change of station? And our whole weapons crew said yes. So we all deployed in November '65. So we would spend, based out of Clark in the Philippines, every 6 weeks we would go up to Tainan, Taiwan, where we sat nuclear alert. And what that entailed is you work 48 hours on, 48 hours off, living in a blockhouse with 4 F-100 aircrafts loaded what they call Mach 43, 1.1 megaton nuclear weapons on an alert. And to give equivalent, I had a brigadier general come through and making inquiries. And so he asked me all the specifics, and I had a young crew with 3 guys, 4 planes. So he's walking away, and I said, oh, sir, these weapons are also magician tricks. And he turned to me, he says, clarify, son. I said, each one of these could make New York City disappear. And he went, very good. But our scenario, typical scenario is a couple of times a month, the klaxon would go 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's just like, boom, you're up outside. Have 8 minutes to get the planes fired up, rolling, and launched.
Here's a question I've always wanted to ask, and I watch it on TV, but they never speak about it.
No.
When we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the atomic bomb,
Right.
and they loaded the atomic bomb onto the B-29 Flying Fortresses,
Right.
when did they set the fuse so it would work so it wouldn't blow up in the air by accident? I mean, was it already ready to go from the time they took off, or was it set up in midair, if I may, if you can tell me?
It was usually like an altimeter type.
What do you mean?
The fuse would start to set when it came about 5,000 feet off the ground. See, the nuclear weapons we had have 13 different safety switches,
Oh, I see.
right, to prevent something from happening, and they have to go in a set sequence coming off.
So there was no chance of it ever blowing up in flight? It was
Not in flight, no. Because
Okay.
the altimeter setting wasn't set until you were up to altitude, and it wouldn't go off till it hit that, whether they wanted an airburst or come down close to the city. But that was a 20 kiloton weapon. So that was, ours were 55 times the size of a Hiroshima.
I'd like to go back to you, William, mate.
Well, before you do that, I'd like to say something.
Please do.
I want to thank the city of Revere, particularly the mayor,
Dan Rizzo, definitely.
for the efforts that he does in behalf of veterans. And I've had a chance to meet him and chat with him. And I want to tell the citizens and residents of Revere, particularly our veterans and veterans' families, that we're fortunate to have a mayor of his caliber and his dedication to the military. And I particularly want to give another big hug to his secretary, Joyce DiNuccio, who was able to give us the directions here, because some people that will remain nameless screwed us up. So go ahead with your question.
No, my question is, now that you mentioned Joyce DiNuccio and Mayor Dan Rizzo,
Yeah.
I notice you like to hug all the beautiful women. I mean,
Well.
you couldn't have picked a better one than Joyce DiNuccio, really.
Okay.
And the mayor. And by the way, we have a great Veteran Service Administrator, Nick
Yes.
Brewer. But I would also like to thank a lady that you
Yes.
may never, that you did not meet,
Yeah.
Eileen Murillo, who made a monument for 149 women in the city of Revere. And I also want to thank
Yes.
Greg Marciello from the Beachmont VFW, who brought the Vietnam Wall here,
The
Woody.
wall,
Yes.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And by the way, Woody,
Yeah.
I got to tell you, there was a young kid there, only 15 years old. I wish I could remember his name again, that joined the Army in Vietnam, got killed after he got over there. He was only 15 years old,
Yeah.
who was on that wall.
We saw, and this is getting back to the ancients' trip that we had to Normandy. There were 300 or 400 of us on the cemetery in Normandy, and there wasn't a dry tear when we were pointed out the cross of the remains of one youngster, 15 years old, that never hit the beach. And to see grown men with tears. And here's a young man, 15 years old, an American, that never even saw young manhood, that gave his life.
Woody, since you and I were in Germany during the time of
Yes.
you during the war, me near the end of the war, and
Yes.
the Germans themselves took 11 and 12, 13 and 14-year-old kids and put them up when the Russians were coming into Berlin to defend the city. And you know, when I spoke to some of the Russians, they felt so bad that they had to shoot them, but they had no choice. It was either them or them.
Right.
One of Hitler's last photographs taken while he was alive was him seen patting the chief,
The little kid,
cheeks
yeah.
of one young Volksgrenadier.
14.
And but you must give credit to the determination of the German people that fought to the last bullet. This fight, and I can't say this enough when I speak around the colleges and universities, that the German spirit of determination was to be admired and respected. So we have to make diligent efforts to see that that can never happen again.
That's a fantastic story you have. But now I want to get back to your friend Jim here. You mentioned real heroes like Tom Hudner, the Medal of Honor winner.
Right.
Yeah.
Tim Kelly, who was a PO.
Tom Kelly.
Tom Kelly, who was a prisoner.
No. No, he won the Medal of Honor for driving essentially a riverboat up on a bank to rescue.
He was a recipient of the...
Recipient.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very touching.
Very
No
touchy.
one
They're
wins.
recipients. It's not a contest, so there's no winner.
I know. I always make that mistake, and I
I know.
apologize for it. I always say he won but he's a recipient of
He's
the
a
Congressional
recipient.
Congressional Medal of Honor.
In this December 7 at Kowloon, I will have both of them, those gentlemen, to honor them. And part of my mission, I started.
Are you letting him plug in his Christmas party at Kowloon?
If he wants to, I don't see why not. He's welcome to. Go ahead.
I've been volunteering for more than 30 years in West Side Social Club and things. And in February 2011, I started Wakefield Cares. We take care of our own. And it started off, we did a dinner, and I honored Darrell Shifty Powers, who everybody says, who is he? Second most decorated Army guy in World War II that no one's ever heard of.
I never heard of him.
He was a sergeant in the Band of Brothers. Okay? So a gentleman named Chuck Yeager was sending,
I know who Chuck Yeager was.
was sending around an email in February 2011 lamenting the fact that the U.S. government had honored him when he passed away in June or July 2009. And you always do what your boss says because Yeager was my boss in the Philippines. So I honored Powers. So what I've done over the last couple of years is several dinners. I honored Hudner at Kowloon in May 2010. We did a Christmas party last December 15. And I was bringing men out from the homeless shelter at Court Street. So we brought 50 out, entertained them. This gentleman has been gracious to come, entertain them. And so that's part of my mission statement now is to honor people that are very unassuming, who have never really told their story. I mean, it's like you look and the gentleman next door mowing his lawn, in his 80s, and you start, what did you do? Oh, I was on the 4th wave at Normandy. What? There was no survivors. The first, supposedly 6 waves, and you survived in the 4th wave. And we have a close friend who was on the 10th wave, and he lives in Reading. I said, what did you do, Arthur? He said, well, do you remember the movie D-Day?
Yeah.
The Rangers that had the Bangalore torpedoes going up through the V, they had to blow the V. He says, that was me carrying the Bangalore torpedoes. And they just don't want to talk about it. So if you just honor them, and so I'm honoring quite a few people.
That's good.
Coming up in December.
Woody, I want to get back to you because you've got interesting stories of World War II. You mentioned to me before we went on the air about a Lieutenant Roger Bill Terry. Mm-hmm. You also mentioned to me about 150 people who came back from a flight and they were not allowed to go into the White Officers Club.
Yes.
And when they did, they were court-martials.
Yes.
Bill Terry was convicted.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little story on that?
Roger Bill Terry was, well, you have to first get a description of how he looked. Bill Terry was one of our better-looking guys. Present company, of course, included.
Thank you.
In all modesty, Bill Terry was really Hollywood cast type. He was around 6'3". He was...
Is he still alive, by the way?
No, he passed on 2 years ago. He looked like an Indian, Cherokee Indian. He had wavy hair, rugged features, and a solid build. And he, of course, was what we would consider a natural leader when the group was going to enter the club. Now let me say something about an officers' club. In the military, an officers' club is not a social gathering place. It is the sole place where commissioned officers dine. You don't eat an enlisted mess unless you're on duty. You can eat in a snack bar if a snack bar is open and available. But an officers' club, you pay dues. You're required to come to commander's calls. When you come to report to duty stations, the commander receives you at the old club, the officers' club. So it was no intrusion to be considered for any officer. Of course, foreign officers could come and go. Canadians, Allied, French could come and go. But for Godman Field, Kentucky, the taboo was for the entrance of black officers. Now, this was not a social event now. This was for dining. So as they approached, they were told that they couldn't come. And I had that experience later on, but the main thing, I was an individual at another base in Virginia. But this was a whole squadron of officers that were denied entrance to the club. So when they were barred, there was a fracas. Of course, there was shoving, and of course you had young men in their 20s that, were not going to take any huff, when they were probably hungry coming in off a flight. And there were some fisticuffs, no great assaults, but they were denied. So there was an order out. The commanding officer put out a direct order. And in the military, when you say 2 words, direct order, you don't debate that. You do it or you're court-martialed. And of course, this was right after wartime. That's treason.
Woody, I want to ask you a question, if I may, sir.
Sure.
I've got this off the internet.
Yeah.
I got friends that do this for me because I'm a computer dummy. Okay, I'll admit that. There's something here that bothers me. It says the newly formed U.S. Air Force initiated plans to integrate, I'm talking about the ski, to integrate its units as early as 1947. But in 1948, President Harry Truman enacted Executive Order number 9981, which directed equality of treatment and opportunity in all, and I want to emphasize the word, in all of the United States Armed Forces. Why did it take 50 years to drop the thing on military?
Well, when you say drop the thing, you mean...
The conviction that he got.
Why was the conviction reversed? You see, he was dishonorably discharged.
Right.
He was caught. Number one, in the military, you don't have a trial. You have a court-martial. You're tried before a military court comprised of military judges. You have defense counsel and so forth, but it's all military. So he was tried along with several other officers, and they were given dishonorable discharges. Can you imagine giving a dishonorable discharge? And that means no veterans benefits,
right.
No salary, and then of course when you're seeking a job or any employment or GI Bill, you're shafted, you get nothing. So that was a conviction. Of course, the President Clinton, after lobbying by the Tuskegee Airmen, and incidentally, I was one of the founders of our national group. We have some 50 chapters, but we vindicated his conviction by electing him president around 10 years ago. And that was a big restoration of our national pride and vindication of a wrong that had been done here.
Can I read something to you from
Sure.
correct
Sure.
me if it's wrong. I'm talking about Lieutenant Roger Bill Terry was convicted 50 years later on August the 12th, 1995.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's a long time.
Right, at the Tuskegee Airmen National Convention in Atlanta, Georgia. 15 of the original 103 officers that were arrested received official notification that their military records had been purged of any reference to the Freeman field incident. Also, Mr. Terry's court-martial conviction had been reversed and his military record cleared. The remaining officers received instructions for clearing their records.
Yes.
It took 50 years from the
Yes.
time President Truman gave that executive order?
Yes. The tragedy is the military runs very slow. And what's even worse, even after having the conviction reversed, what we tried to do was to have his back pay restored. How can you give back 50 years when you're denied veterans benefits? What about his health care? This was really the result of lobbying President Clinton. He's to be commended for that. And the same thing, we had to lobby to have our first black air ace declared, an ace, who was Lee Archer from New York. And the rate, his ace rate was about a half of kill short. Now, the person that had his half offered to give up his half so he could be up to the magic 5. But the Air Force didn't want to do that. But anyway, we lobbied, and Lee Archer was declared an ace. And Lee Archer, he's a heck of a guy, fine officer, and he was a great communicator. I would say he was a great BSer. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But Lee was strictly New York guy.
You're looking at one, too.
Yeah, you said it, not me.
No, no. I mean, I like to exaggerate sometimes, you know.
Well, sometimes it helps.
I got to say one thing, Jim. As I look at this back here, and I got to tell you, you had the Vietnam War Memorial, which was also a museum that came here about them in the past to Revere, you know, a museum of Vietnam.
A couple of weeks ago.
Yep. But you also have, which I notice here, Tuskegee Airmen National Historical Museum,
Yes.
located in Detroit, Michigan.
Yes.
Have you ever visited it?
Oh, yes, I visited. I not only visited, I've sunk a few bucks in there, and they still charge me admission to get in, but that's the way things
What
go
does
today.
that museum consist of?
Well, it consists of artifacts, memorabilia, and some of us donate our souvenirs. The Air Force has been able to give some. But our real main museum for the Tuskegee Airmen is at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, where
Right.
most of the
Air Force training
flyers
too.
were trained. And for exhibits, we were also instrumental in having a Tuskegee Airmen exhibit at the Air Force Academy. We're very proud to be on that.
Do they have a monument for, excuse me, not only for the men who passed away, but for the men that served at the Tuskegee Air Force? I mean, their names listed on a monument? If they don't?
Some are and some aren't, because what we have done, I don't mean to switch the subject, but something, and this isn't for anything I've done, but I just wanted to bring out the outreach that we have been trying to do. 10 years ago, when we had a flying budget, I was instrumental in having an airlift of 20-odd young men and women, are actually to me boys and girls, high school types, to have 2 trips to the academy. And we flew them out, housed them in the NCO barracks, and gave them a smattering of what Air Force life is like and see if any of them could talk to any of their senators and congressmen to give them an appointment. And this is really happenstance being here. One of the young men that we were able to fly out, he was appointed along with another young man who I put through Senator Kennedy's office. And I saw his father yesterday at a funeral. And his son is now a full colonel, and he's assigned to the Pentagon. And I had bumped into him 8 years ago, and he was a lieutenant colonel at that time, and he was air attaché to our embassy in Cairo. His name is Korea. This is what we are doing now as old guys, bringing on young people to give them a shot, because that's what helped me, and I think I should pass it on.
I think you're doing an excellent job, Woody. Jim, before we wrap it up, why don't you take a few minutes and tell us what you'd like to do, what your future plans are?
With the Veterans Organization that
Whatever you want to talk about is your show.
Well, I've been bringing men and women out from the Court Street shelter, treating them to entertainment.
You still got the shelter there for the
Oh, yeah.
homeless?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many of them...
Women too.
Many of them are very heavily medicated. So come out, tied into some of the best comedians around here who volunteer their services. Bobby Wong from the Kowloon has a great price, and I get them subsidized on it. We met a gentleman from the old Soldiers Home, Chelsea Old Soldiers Home. We had a barbecue this morning at the Saugus VFW. So I'm going to invite them, some of them coming out in the fall. But the other thing is taking a look at honoring Massachusetts national heroes, Massachusetts heroes, and local heroes. And give an example, Phyllis Hull I honored 2 years ago, and her husband was, she's 86, her husband was a World War II Marine in the Pacific, and she personally put together the World War II Memorial, the new granite memorial in Wakefield. So I honored her at the dinner I had in 2011. The next year, Tom Collins, who was the commander of the Wakefield American Legion, and I belonged to the Legion, I honored him for his participation in it. And it's to honor a national hero. I've done Tom Hudner twice, a road race, a dinner, and the local heroes. We'll be doing someone else coming up in
You're going to have a Christmas party December the 7th, you said Pearl Harbor Day.
Pearl Harbor Day.
And you're going to have a lot of those heroes there. If people want to make contact with you to get tickets, could you tell them how to do it, Jim?
Website should be going up this afternoon. It's called Wakefield Cares, Wakefield, CARES.com. And then they can reach me at 781-850-6478. The whole planning starts to go together next Saturday at the Kowloon. I'll have 500 tickets, and there will be 100 special tickets on a meet and greet to meet these people. 3 Medal of Honor.
3 Medal of Honor?
Right. Mm-hmm. World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. We have 3 prisoner of war from World War II, a German-Romanian prisoner, Korean War prisoner, and a Vietnam prisoner. 5 years guest at Hanoi Hilton. The Korean gentleman is from Melrose, and a personal friend, Lieutenant Commander Stephen Harris, who was tortured by the North Koreans for 11 months. He was the second in command of the Pueblo spy ship. Right? Oh,
yes, I remember that.
The World War II gentleman, Al Romano, is from Lynn, still works every day at 91, and I saw POW on his license plate, and he's working in Wakefield. So we then started talking to him, and I said, where were you POW? He says, Romanian-German prisoner of war camp for 11 months. I said, how'd you get there? He said, I was a second lieutenant navigator on a B-24, the Chattanooga Choo-Choo. And on August 1st, 1943, we went on the famous Ploesti oil field raids.
I remember that in Romania.
We came in at Treetop, dropped our bombs. He says we got shot up, crashed. One of the people perished, and we were taken care of by a Romanian princess who was giving us care packages. And when the Germans started fleeing back into Germany, they helped us escape from Romania. I mean, these people are iron fisted.
Is this gentleman going to be there too, Christmas?
Yes, he will.
So, for you people out there that want to meet Woody,
Yep.
Jim, this is the place.
Meet Tom Hudner, meet Tom Kelly, meet Joanne Patton, General Patton's daughter-in-law.
Right.
And we'll be having a cocktail party for just 100 tickets about an hour before the main. I have James Montgomery Blues Band. I have 6 comedians. So it'll be one heck of a day.
Now,
Jim,
Woody,
I'd like to be there, but be sure you don't charge me the top rate.
You get in for free. you get in for free, my friend. You know?
don't tell me he's charging you, Woody.
Well, that's just a family joke
I
Jim
know
and I have.
Woody, would you like to say something about your family, about yourself, about, before we wrap it up?
Well,
Because I got to tell you, it's an honor and a pleasure, not only to me, but to the people of Revere and to those who are watching out there to have you take the time to come up here.
well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor for me to share my experiences, because every one of us, even a few Rockefellers I know, have problems. His problems are a little different than our problems. But I can't thank enough of the many people that have helped me, and I in turn try to help others along this interesting road of life. Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Go ahead, Jim.
Just
You
one-
want to say something?
One party. In the events that I've put on in the last couple of months, I've met some remarkable Revere people. Joe Caffarelli, who's your chief of police, is a former Marine. I helped them put on a function at the Mottola VFW
Right.
post in March. Dennis Marcella, I met about a year and a half ago.
Right.
Dennis, I mean, great person, great heart, and they let me do an event at the Mottola.
People got to remember, Jim, that we have a Revere Veteran Service.
And Nick
Boer.
Yeah.
Nick
Right.
Nick is a great guy.
He's the one that gets a lot of these organizations, the big shots to come down. He tried to get the Tom Hudner, where he didn't have much luck with that.
I brought him
No, at the
at the wall.
not at the wall, at the Legion.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to try and get him. We also, there's another gentleman down there, maybe you know him, Paul Monty, whose son Jared Monty got killed in Afghanistan, Congressional Medal of Honor winner. And he was the recipient, excuse me, folks, recipient, thank you for correcting me. They couldn't put flags on the graves at one time at Bourne, and Mr. Monty went down and spoke to President Obama in person and told him the story, and it only took one day for Obama to send a telegram to the commandant down in Bourne that there will be flags going on those graves. So that was good. So I got to say, I got to say this. Yeah. I want to thank you both for coming up here. Jim,
Pleasure.
God bless you, and thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Woody Woodhouse, as a
Always
World
a
War II
pleasure.
veteran, to another
Alrighty.
one. God
Okay.
bless you, and thank you for your service.
Okay.
And thank you for your service
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you
and,
all.
and the invitation. So.
Right,
Right.
and to the people of Revere, God
Yeah.
bless you all. God bless our troops. God bless the great country, the United States of America. Until the next time, thank you for listening.